Welcome to Vale United Methodist Church Online. This is our weekly sermon from Pastor Jeff Haugh. Welcome. This is our sermon for September 22nd of 2019, the 15th Sunday after the Pentecost. We are starting our series based on Tom Berlin's book, Reckless Love. And this week we're going to talk about how we begin with love and what it means to really transform how we look and encounter other people in the world around us. We'll start with our scripture from Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 31, the Common English Bible. Jesus replied, "The most important thing is, Israel, listen. Our God is the one Lord, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you will love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
So a new sheriff came into town, and she loved fishing, and she tried. She heard about this one gentleman, Charlie, who was supposed to be a great fisherman, but Charlie didn't seem very interested in inviting her to go fishing with him. And she dropped hints, and she spent time in the community getting to know him and his family and everybody in the community, but especially focused on him. And finally, one day, he invited her to go fishing. So she was all excited. She got her stuff ready. She got her fishing poles and tackle and all that. And she shows up at the dock, and there's Charlie and in his boat, and she doesn't see any fishing poles, but maybe they're not quite where she can see them, and she doesn't worry about it a whole lot. But they head out, and she starts to get her stuff ready when they get to the fishing spot, and Charlie looks at her and says, no, don't worry about that. And she's okay. And he reaches into his tackle box and he pulls out a stick of dynamite. And she's like, "You can't do that. You can't fish with dynamite. I mean, it's illegal. You can't do it." And he looks at her and he takes a stick of dynamite. He takes his lighter. He lights the stick and hands it to her. He says, "Are you going to talk or are you going to fish?" So often we talk a lot, and we need to be fishing. Not that way, please. I'm not advocating that. But there was a study that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and it got some press coverage. It was kind of interesting. They asked people, what is a thought or a prayer worth to you? They tried to put a monetary value on it. And it was pretty interesting the way they did the study. And what they use Christians and non-Christians as test subjects, and they asked them to self-declare their preference. And it turned out that Christians would pay about $4 to have someone pray for them. Now, if it was a priest, it would be $7. So I guess our prayers are worth more. But non-Christians would only pay $2 to have no prayer said for them. Rather than paying $4 for a prayer like a Christian would, they would pay $2 to not have someone pray for them. They pay $3.50 for a priest not to pay. It shows you, sometimes our talk is worth nothing. This lawyer comes to Jesus, and he wants to know what is the greatest commandment. And again, lawyer in the Old Testament is not a civil lawyer like we think of in the day, but a lawyer of God's rules and regulations of the Torah. Would have been an expert. He would have studied that, all the commandments. And he comes to Jesus and he says, which one is the greatest? Now, he probably had an idea of what he thought it was, but he was trying to engage Jesus in this conversation. And Jesus says, love God. Love your neighbor. And this is the greatest commandment. And I truly believe that that's what Jesus was trying to tell us. We can talk about the law, we can talk about God, but we have to act, we have to love. There's a rabbi who once said that the greatest contribution of Judaism to the world, to religion, is not monotheism, the belief in only one God, but the understanding that the God we are worshiping is a God who is better than you. Think about that. Think about, I've talked before about the gods of the ancient Near East, the gods of the Roman and Greek Empire, and they're really just, they have human flaws and human characters, and they have powers and abilities, but they're not better than us. God, Yahweh, is. But calls us into relationships so that we too can be better than what we are. God's love calls us to look beyond ourselves, to enter into relationships of love. God calls us into holy communion with God, but also with each other. To love God with all of your being is to live God's way. Jesus calls us to transform how we live, not just to talk, but to fish. In 1 Peter, we hear this. Finally, all of you have unity of spirit, sympathy, love for one another, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil or abuse for abuse, but on the contrary, repay with a blessing, for it is what you were called, that you might inherit a blessing. That's Peter telling us what's important here. To love and to act. 1 John 3:11, for this is the message you have heard from the beginning, that you should love one another. It's that simple. But it's hard to love others, isn't it? In Luke's version of this, Jesus goes on and tells the story of the Good Samaritan. That we should be a good neighbor to everyone, not just those who live next door. Don't just talk. Fish. But it's hard work. In his book, Tom Berlin says, it is only when we commit to love our neighbor and intentionally accomplish this goal that we learn what it means to fully love God. Now, it's not a new idea on Tom's part. Dorothy of Gaza said this centuries ago. Christian life is like living spokes on the wheel. And the closer we grow to God, the closer we grow to one another. And the closer we grow to one another, the closer we grow to God. When I do premarital counseling with couples, I talk about love not being just an emotion. It's a wonderful emotion, but it needs to be a verb, an action. And it's interesting over the years how it's changed, because I do an assessment, and it's a psychological evaluation. I mean, that sounds really dry, but I guess it is the fill in the dot assessment. But anyway. And I'll tell them this is not a test you're passing, it's an assessment. And what this system does is it goes through and it compares how they think and live and their personality, and it shows where they may have some conflicts and some differences, but also where their strengths are. But more so in the past few years, I'll get these results back and I can look at it and say, you two met online. Because the computer has shown that they're just right in sync with each other. Now, that's not a bad thing. But even couples that are wonderful for each other, that met differently, have some differences. The problem with couples that have been matched by the computer is that they don't necessarily know how to work through differences. They're in such sync, they don't know what to do when they get out of sync. We live in a world that we isolate ourselves, and we only relate with people like us, and we self-select. And we don't always know how to have a conversation with someone who is out of sync, who thinks differently. who may not like us. It's hard work. We can't just talk, we have to go fish. Barbara Brown Taylor says the hardest spiritual work in the world is to love the neighbor as the self. To encounter another human being not as someone you can use, change, fix, help, save, enroll, convince, or control, but simply as someone who can spring you from the prison of yourself, if you will allow. Christ is calling us to do that, to engage in other people's lives, to show them love, that they too may love God. It's hard work. Coming back to a fishing metaphor here, or a boating metaphor, over time, as ships, especially ocean-going vessels, spend time in the water, they begin to get barnacles on them, and it's a major problem. I mean, it costs billions of dollars because as the barnacles grow, it creates drag on the ship, and they have to spend more fuel, more pollution, and it slows them down. Well, to clean them off is difficult work. And sometimes they have to put the ship in dry dock and use torches and really put a lot of effort into it. But those things don't just show up overnight. It starts with just a biofilm, and these microscopic creatures attach. And it becomes a film, and then the larger creatures attach and grow, and it keeps growing and growing. And there's a lot of research done trying to keep those things from starting. Because at first it doesn't seem like much. But if you let it go, it slows the ship down. And anger and hatred is like that in a relationship. It may not start as much, but it builds and it grows, and finally that ship can't move. We've talked about vicious circles where anger begets anger and war begets war. But we need to work on virtuous circles. Love begetting love, begetting love. Loving our neighbors. Not talking, but fishing. How do we do that? Well, we start with love. Begin each day. How can I love someone? When you encounter someone, how can I respond in love? What is the most loving thing I can do for this person? And no, it's not cutting them off at the stop sign. No, it's not waving your hand in anger or yelling things. Stepping back, letting them go first. Showing love in wonderful ways. You have a conversation with somebody. So often we make assumptions. Several weeks ago we were outside working on the church and getting ready to do some spray painting, and Kim said, my car is too close, and that spray may come and get on my new car. So I said, well, I'll move your car, and I got her car, and I started, and I went all the way down to the end of the church parking lot. And somebody said, in a loving way, was like, well, that was pretty passive aggressive, She just needed you to move a little bit. I said, look, and you could have seen it that way. But what I said was, no, the reason I moved it that far was to keep it in the shade, so it would be not so hot when she got into it. If I was going to move it, I might as well move it to a better location. But do you see how my action could have been interpreted either way? And if you start with anger and hatred, then it just builds it. In this case, it was completely wrong. But if you start with, oh, what a loving thing he did. Begin with love. Makes a world of difference. And our thoughts and our prayers move into actions. Actions that make a difference. Actions that transform lives. Actions that show others that God is love. Jesus calls us to love. So begin with love. Don't just talk about it. Fish. Will you pray with me? Lord, teach us your will. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else.